Okay, internet. So I tried to film a couple things about some hip tutorials outside online and didn't work because cameras are horrible. Anyways, we're back in the Hobbit hole doing this instead. So, Quapley from my Patreon Discord, check it out if you're not there, suggested I do another quick review on this gentleman whose name I cannot pronounce because people in the States have boring names, but let's give it a try. Rasmus Saukkoriipi. I don't know. I don't even know where he's from because I'm an ignorant American. But he seems cool, and his throw seems very cool. So let's look at his throw. That's why we're here. I am going to need my draw tool for this. This is going to get intense. We can get that up. So first thing I noticed is his initial step and his X step are the same as Cole Redallen's, actually, which violates our Bible, which is Brian Earhart's X Step Deep Dive video. So maybe we need to edit that. So he's putting this initial step on a 45. Pretty sure Bearhart says he wants it on a 90. And then he's putting his X step on the other 45, which is also supposed to be on 90 according to Brian Earhart and me. So apparently, if you're throwing as long as these guys, going to 245s in opposite directions is okay too. So then his stride towards his plant is pretty interesting because well, I'll let you look at it. So frame by frame with commentary. His plant foot's open. He's gonna plant with his foot open. He's gonna do it. I'm gonna get to make fun of a pro on the internet. He's gonna plant with his toe open. He's gonna. Oh wait. Huh. His heel is actually a little bit, maybe a little bit behind, but that's flat enough. That's fine. But he actually did the opposite of what we all do, right? We all jut our heel out to the front, and then end up turning the foot around and landing toe front at the last step. But he's reaching forward with his toe, and then his heel ends up landing down. So, anyways, point being, I think he's doing a later coil, like just how everyone's been kind of freaking out about recently because of Cole. Yeah. So look at this shape right here, and note how his thigh doesn't really move a whole bunch during the next couple frames. And then look at this shape right here, and notice how it all seems to rotate back that way as I frame forward. So I'll click back into the video and then wind up a little bit. Okay, so going forward from here, his belly button is still coiling back. Like now it stopped. His shoulders are still coiling. His stomach is still turning towards the rear until like there it stops. So like here his stomach isn't moving very much at all. He's just shifting targetward. But then if I go back past those frames, now his stomach is turning again. So always be coiling. Absolutely right, always be coiling. Maybe here we can stop coiling. But that's definitely the cue, is keep coiling your hips while you're reaching out to the plant, because that affects his front leg even, which none of us are thrown that way. So this guy's got some stuff figured out. So that's downstairs. But then here, like, if this guy wasn't a pro, here in this shape from this camera angle, I would complain to him about your rear leg is too long and your front leg is too short, right? So he's kind of violating the prime directive here. But rules aren't rules, right? A very wise man once said, only Siths deal in absolutes. He was kidding, but he was also correct. So there's rules exist to be broken, right? Once you understand the principle a rule is trying to teach you, contain the hips, then it's okay to break it, because I can get back to the video ever. He very much does contain his hips. He ends in perfect balance with even more control than Gibson. So his input to output ratio is correct. Input being momentum going into the brace, output being stopping power of the brace. It's perfectly calibrated. So he has enough containment. So it doesn't matter what shape he's in if he has enough containment. So that's downstairs. It's confusing enough. But his upper body is even groovier. And I've never seen this before. I just figured this out like 5 minutes ago. So it could be totally harebrained and nonsense. But it makes sense to me. So here from this reach back, again, I would tell him he's going to screw it up from here if he was an amateur. Because, or he's going to throw flat from hyzer like Eagle, which he's not really doing that. He's doing something else. But he's using this principle of intentionally violating your shoulder plane, which there's no good way to draw this. If I could, like, tilt ovals the right way the first try, it would make sense, but I'm just going to confuse you if I try to do that. So I'll just try to explain it. So his shoulder, I can draw lines. I can do that. But I have to, like, 3-step it. So his shoulder plane, from his point of his shoulder to his point of his shoulder. It won't let me draw. YouTube's. Get back to that point. No, other way. So he's hanging his elbow lower than his shoulder plane, basically. So here, when he's like getting into his reach back, not in full reach back position, but so I'm going to draw a line from the point of his shoulder to the point of his shoulder, and then I'm going to take that line and extend it. So this is his shoulder plane. I guess actually it would make more sense if I tried to do it like that. So like his shoulder plane is here. So his shoulder plane is going to rotate like that. Kinda. Get rid of that one. So, I mean, maybe his elbow is like closer to his shoulder plane than I thought, but I think his elbow is lower than his plane, and I can prove it later. Because shapes, internet. But shapes are hard. We could be wrong. So, well, okay, anyways, here, the axis that his elbow is set to bend on is pretty darn close to vertical, right? So if you bent his elbow here, his hand would come towards his head. That means his elbow is bending off of the plane, because his hyzer tilt in his shoulders is about 45 degrees. Let that sink in. So now his shoulder plane is easier to draw. I'm not in the video. Back it up, back it up, back it up. Line tool. So his shoulder plane is like here on a 45. And his elbow looks, I mean, it's so confusing. If you were to bend his elbow, his arm would go almost straight up. So the straight up line, when made to intersect with the shoulder plane line, is not on the same angle, so it doesn't work, right? Like, there's no good way to explain that on the internet that I'm aware of without having three. If I had 3 camera angles, I could do it, right? If I had a shot from directly behind him, a shot from, this is off angle, right? If the camera was here looking that way, then that's what I would want. I want a reference angle. And then if I had overhead too, I'd actually be able to calibrate. Anyways, his elbow is not going to bend on the plane. His elbow is going to go down below the plane. His hand is going to come up above the plane. Beginners do this, and the disc comes way too far up, because they're not intentionally controlling the disc. They're just bending their elbow willy-nilly. But this guy knows what he's doing, and he's bending his elbow and dropping the elbow specifically, not just bending the arm and letting letting the pivot point be around the center of the arm, but he's making the pivot point be a floating spot outside of the body in the elbow, such that the disc continues forward in a reasonable manner without flaring upwards like beginners usually do. Look at literally any beginner ever throwing, they will all scoop like this. But he's not scooping. He's not having the disc come up. He's having the elbow go down off the plane intentionally. So that's a flat from hyzer idea. So shifts into his front foot, starts to bend. The elbow is coming down below the plane. The disc is raising up a little bit above the plane. See, that would be a horrible giant evil flare in the beginner. But because this guy's controlling his arm, it's just a little scoop down. It's not problematic. And then an interesting thing happens when this reflects around the lower apex of the swing. So his elbow's kind of going to do this because it's on that hyzer tilt that I can't draw. It's on that hyzer tilt that his shoulders are on, right? So if his elbow made a circle all the way around, it would kind of sort of be there. So when he gets to this lowest point, given that he has a complex swing plane, everything gets really funky really quick. If it's a simple swing plane and his shoulders are on this plane, his elbow is set to bend on this plane, and his wrist and his disc are on the outside of the plane, then everything stays the same through the center point. When something is above the plane or below the plane, it tends to kind of sort of reflect around the center point. So what the heck does that mean? His elbow is below the plane and his disc is above the plane right now. So those are going to switch when you hit center point. His elbow is going to want to start going up and the disc is going to want to start going down. So the elbow is currently too low and it's going to go higher, and the hand is currently too high and it's going to go lower. So that means everything's going to move towards where we actually want it to be. So if this is starting to make you think of how Matty-O throws, you would be correct. If this was starting to make you understand why Matty-O throws like that, then you're in the same boat as me. I could not make sense of Matty-O, but this guy is helping me make sense. Maybe it's because the second time we've seen it. Maybe it's because I'm looking closer at this guy than I looked at Matt. So here, elbow's going down. Disc is coming up. He starts kind of auto-correcting for the disc. But now that he's past center, or getting to center, also note forward projection of the front shoulder socket, making the lever longer and stretching out all the muscles that, retract the shoulder blade so that system is loaded. I'm pretty sure this jives with Seabass's stuff on loading the bow and arrow, that you want tension in this system the whole way. I don't entirely understand his material and all that, so I could be mistaken. But anyways, here the elbow's too low, the hand is too high, and then as we go forward, the elbow starts auto-correcting up because of the swing path of the shoulder plane, and the hand starts auto-correcting down. So we see the disc moving into hyzer. But he lined it up like he was going to throw flat. Right, the disc is pretty flat the whole time. Looking at that disc angle, you would expect to see a flat shot. But then because of the scoop, he switches into a significant hyzer by the time he releases. So again, that's the elbow going up and the hand going down, right? So if we wanted to get all Seabass and like draw that at every position, it would be the disc is here, the elbow is here, and then the elbow should be a different color because Seabass knows stuff. So it should be, the elbow goes down and then up and ends up where it is. And then the disc goes a little bit up. And then as the elbow starts to go down, the disc switches and is lower. So the magic is this switch point where the disc gets heavy and slings out. The other magic is the momentum here from the flare of the disc is something that this part can pull against. So that's the reason that out in out as a swing path relative to your chest works, is because the first in is giving the disc momentum towards your chest that can be resisted by the sling out. I don't quite understand the physics, but it super matters having something to pull against. So this gentleman is getting that to happen automatically by having his disc flare up, which happens passively. It just happens because of his elbow orientation. So he's just pulling on his arm with his hip and his shoulder. That's making the disc flare, which is giving him extra momentum towards his chest. And then when the elbow apexes around the bottom of the swing, the hand automatically starts to drift down, and then the rip out happens on more of a hyzer. So if that makes any sense, then you have amazing listening skills, because I sound like I'm making things up. But I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. Like he's doing the out and out thing, but he's doing it on an up to down axis, which like totally makes sense that that's what Matty O is doing too, right? So he's using some girthy vibes and harnessing that downward motion and the downward crunch in the abs, and using that to put more power into the arm too. So this guy just has a very funky, almost more subtle, definitely more subtle way of doing it, because his reach back doesn't look all freaky like Matty's does. Like he's not super high. It's just a normal reach back, but he does get there from a hanging elbow position, not a full swing like Philo does or used to do, but like it's a pretty normal reach back. He's just got his elbow pointed down pretty far. So it just comes through, comes into the chest flat, little tiny flare because of the elbow, and then corrects to hyzer on the way out. That's, in my limited experience of watching pros, that is not very common. And he's definitely the first one that I've seen do it when I've been paying enough attention to notice how weird it is. Yeah, so really cool throw. Thanks, Guapley, for pointing that out. That was definitely informative to me, so hopefully it's informative to someone else. And if you think I'm crazy and none of that makes any sense, please let me know in the comments. I will not call you unreasonable. All right, Internet, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.